History. Some folks like to read about it. Some like to visit museums or historic sites. Others search for long-lost antiquities. And then there are the living historians. They like to step back into history and recreate specific events that happened long ago.
Tell me a tale of the timberlands and the old-time pioneers. Something a poor man understands with his feelings as well as ears. Talk about the old log house, about the loft and the punching floor. The old fireplace where the crane swung out and the latch streamed through the door.
North Carolina's relationship to textile manufacturing dates back to pioneer days. Commercial manufacturing of cotton cloth began in 1813 when David Schenk's cotton mill was built on the banks of the Catawba River in Lincoln County. By 1840, there were 25 textile mills operating in the state. North Carolina produced more cloth during the Civil War years than ever before. The Confederate States of America had contracts with every cotton mill in the Old North State.
There's been a lot of research about the kinds of materials that soldiers wore, not just what it looked like, or not just was it stitched together correctly, but the material itself. How was it woven? How was it dyed?
For reenactors, it's all in the details. The smell of a wood fire, a perfectly worn pair of shoes, the heft of a musket, the weight and feel of a pair of trousers.
One of the things that we try to do, first of all, is we strive for authenticity in our appearance. The pants that I'm wearing are a jeans cloth material, which is a cotton wool blend.
Pants like these are very nearly made like they were during the Civil War, and they're dyed with natural ingredients. Pants and all the other items for reenactors are available on eBay, and they're sold by sutlers, modern-day outfitters for living historians. Civil War soldiers from North Carolina were very well clothed. They were fortunate. The textile industry was relatively strong in the state, and the front lines were a lot closer to home than for soldiers from the Deep South. Most of the jeans cloth worn by North Carolina regiments was produced in mills like this one near Rocky Mount. A cotton mill in Salisbury served a quite different purpose. It was used as a hospital and a camp for Union prisoners of war. Thousands of Union soldiers died in this camp during the Civil War. Over 11,000 of them were buried in unmarked graves in a field near the mill. The site is now home to a national cemetery. The cotton mill never produced another stitch of cloth. Troops under General George Stoneman's command burned the mill to the ground. Hundreds of other cotton mills would rise to take its place as industry came to a devastated South. The textile industry, which rose like a phoenix from the ashes of defeat, is part of our collective fabric. It's the key to understanding our past and preparing for the future. Writers tend to write about what they know, and Southern writers draw upon their unique experiences, their lives in the land of cotton.
You know, I was a sophomore in college the first time that I worked in the mill, and as a sophomore in college, I was brilliant, you know, as all sophomores are.
Michael Chitwood is a freelance writer and visiting lecturer at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He's written a collection of poems called The Weave Room. It's all about his experience working in a textile mill in the summers during his college years.
Entering the weave room. At the start bell, they pull the stained handle and the great doors swing open. The blast is warm, a roaring hush. They step into this lush wind like the backdraft from a huge unearthly flock. The strings jump in the harnesses of these clattering, greasy harps. The music here is how you make it. I hope people get a feel for people doing in a heroic almost kind of way, I think, going about their lives. It's ordinary, and yet because of that, it's also extraordinary. Weave room, baptism. The air is kept full of water to save the yarn. Every word floats away like a bubble, soundless. This drowning is for a living. At the end of a shift, they are rinsed in the sound of it, the smell in their hair like the musk of the lake. When they come out, they find their fateful words waiting. These are church-going people, and they have that spirituality, I think, underpins everything that they do and how they approach that. And I wanted to get that very much into the poems. I have been very, very pleased with the reaction to the Weave Room.
For her writing project about cotton mill culture, Victoria Byerly interviewed women who worked in the industry. Hard Times Cotton Mill Girls is a collection of those first-hand accounts.
Women weren't even, black women weren't even janitorial people then.
Corinne Cannon is one of the subjects of Victoria Byerly's book. She was one of the first African Americans hired by Cannon Mills to have a production job, a job where you were paid not by the hour, but for the amount of work you did.
I do give my mama credit for always telling you as good as anybody ever trod God's soil.
By the time black women were allowed to work production jobs in cotton mills in the 1960s, white women had been working in the industry for decades. And one of those women captured the imagination of cartoonist and novelist Doug Marlette.
Someone gave me a copy of a book called Like a Family, and it was a history of the Southern cotton mill culture, and I had never seen it. I took it home. I was standing in the kitchen flipping through the pages, and there was my grandmother's name in this book. And it told about my grandmother's being stabbed, being bayoneted at the Pioneer plant in Burlington, North Carolina. I couldn't believe anyone had heard of her.
Doug's ability to create poignant, often pointed political cartoons was his passport out of the good old boy country he came to know while growing up in North Carolina and Mississippi. After winning the Pulitzer Prize for cartooning at the Charlotte Observer, he went to work for New York Newsday.
I'm looking as a young man in my 20s and looking to the Northeast and to other places for goodness and truth and enlightenment. And then over time, I go to those places, and I spent time at Harvard and I spent time in New York City. And you start seeing that, oh my gosh, these people are just like, they're just as narrow and backwards, and my people at least had an excuse. They were mill workers, they were farmers. I mean, they had an excuse for their ignorance. They were not educated. These people choose ignorance.
When Doug moved back to North Carolina with his wife and son, the cartoonist discovered the rich cotton mill history of his family. His grandmother and his uncle Walt Pickard had been union organizers in what came to be known as the Uprising of '34.
500,000 textile workers went out on strike, and the largest strike to that time, a single industry strike in American history, and it was put down brutally in 3 weeks in September '34, and that my family was involved in it. This is astonishing to me.
Doug's first novel, The Bridge, has been well received by critics and mill workers alike. It's based on the true story of his grandmother, Mama Gracie, as well as other historical events, including the massacre of cotton mill workers in Honea Path, South Carolina.
One of the reasons I wrote this as fiction is because all the things I was learning about the strike and about that culture, I wanted to kind of try to telescope all of that into one place, have it happening in one place, so you could get all a feel for that. The book was an exercise in restoring that pride, for taking pride in things that I thought I was ashamed of.